Unheard and Disregarded on iHeart, IntellectualRadio.com. I'm your co-host, Kanye Yukumare, and riding shotgun with me is my esteemed co-host and colleague, Frank Bass.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? How was your weekend?
Hot. It's a weekly conversational intersection of politics and policy taking place every Monday from 3 to 4 p.m. Policy, how decisions and how they're determined in politics, action, and how it's implemented. The fact of the matter is opinions and perspectives from Black folks go unheard or are in many cases disregarded. This show provides a form of cultural and racial diversity for our listeners to be better informed about the world around you from a Black perspective by simply downloading the iHeartRadio app or going to iHeartRadio.com, typing Intellectual Radio in the search box, and clicking the Intellectual Radio icon. We invite those near and far to not only listen, but be an active participant. Frank, as you recall, last week we talked about Black Lives Matter. We talked about President Obama and his computation of sentences, among things specific to Illinois politics in Chicago. Specifically today, we're going to talk a little more about Trump's policy positions that reflect the GOP. Talk about protests in Milwaukee that took place over the weekend. A recap of the Olympics and the importance of Black Lives Mattering. Clearly, it matters in Rio. Voter suppression in Illinois and some legislation tied to teens being stopped by police, along with we'll talk about the Bud Billiken parade that took place this weekend and some of the controversy behind that. So with that, welcome to the show. Thank you for listening, and let's get started.
Well, let's talk about Trump and some of the crazy things he talks about he would do with the federal budget if he was elected president. I think it's hilarious how people are really believing what he's saying. Here's a man that's going to say he's going to bring jobs back from China, Japan, India, and Brazil when he was on David Letterman, and David Letterman was asking about his own company and some of the own things that he produced, like the ties that was made in Indonesia or the shirts that were made in other countries. And his reaction was, people in those countries need jobs too. Well, how can he sit back and say he's going to force other companies to do the things that he won't do? The estate tax. Why is he looking out for the people who make $10 million or more that they leaving behind in their estate, and not looking out for the $60,000, $50,000, $40,000 a year family that's struggling to make it? I don't understand him. And of course, this whole I'm going to force another country to build a wall. I don't see how he's going to make somebody do what they already said they're not going to do.
Yeah. Frank, let me be clear to the informed. Donald Trump sounds like a nutcase, but we have to be clear on the fact that Donald Trump is not trying to appeal to those in the know. He's trying to appeal to those who have no idea what he's talking about. And unfortunately, there's a large population in this country that are ill-informed about what's going on in the world around them. So they're more apt to believe anyone that appeals to their fears and their prejudices. And Donald Trump has an honorary doctorate degree in that regard. But I think it's important for everyone to realize that we must not get caught up into the personality of Trump or what he's saying. Last week, he released a series of policy positions, focusing less on who he is and what he was going to do. And this is where the mainstream Republican Party is very much in line with Donald Trump. While many along the mainstream of the GOP have indicated they will not be supporting him, they will not be endorsing him, that does not mean they will not be voting for him. And they're going to vote for him because what he believes and what he wants to do is in line with what the GOP has been trying to do for the last 40 years, irrespective of the fact that those plans have failed. Among them, as you said, Frank, you talked about estate tax. Donald Trump is for killing the estate tax. To be clear, only 0.2% of the 1% actually benefit and cash in from the estate tax.
So that means Donald Trump's friends will be able to cash in on
Yeah,
it.
that's more money in their pockets, less that they'll have to pay to the federal government. Independent studies have indicated that if that was to happen, the deficit would be $263 billion more than what it is. So while Republicans are adamantly against the deficit and blame the Democrats for the deficit and the programs that the Democrats support, what really happens is they're advocating for a policy position that actually worsens the deficit. Anti-unions. He is very much in favor of right to work laws, which is a nice way of saying he's anti-union. He has flip-flopped on the minimum wage. So for the large population of Trump supporters out there that believe and are going to vote for Trump, be clear on the fact that he feels that the minimum wage that many of you bring in should be lowered. It should not be in line. Then he said at one point, it shouldn't be lowered. It should be in line with federal guidelines. Then he said it should be raised to $10 an hour. Here's a guy trying to minimize how much money everyday workers bring home, but trying to maximize how much money the 1% or 20% of the 1% can bring home. He believes in reducing the corporate tax rate, which is a nice way of saying, people, you all pay the taxes. Businesses, we're not going to pay anything. We know that does not work. He's a big fan of getting rid of the Environmental Protection Agency and doing away with the U.S. Department of Education.
So wait. So he want to get rid of the EPA. Aren't they the ones who make sure Lake Michigan stays clean?
Yeah.
We have clean drinking water.
In theory.
And aren't they the ones who, if they were on their job, would ensure that the people in Flint never went through what they went through?
Right.
So what about the people in Galesburg and other parts of Illinois that's now having issues with their drinking water? Right. So you telling me that you got folks who want to vote for a man who wants to get rid of the EPA? Wait a minute. And then he wants to bust unions. And those are the same unions that's been trying to keep folks employed at good paying jobs so they can put food on their plates and take care of their mortgages.
So for police unions, fire unions, government workers, federal workers, U.S. Postal Service, the unions collective bargaining played a huge role in ensuring that the middle class would not only sustain that, but that it would prosper. And here you have a demagogue who is distracting everybody with his circus of comments.
Now, demagogue, some folks don't know what that is.
Oh, they know what it is. Anyone that fans flames of prejudice to throw you off the scent from what's really going on. He can talk about Muslims. He can talk about the fact that Obama is the founder of ISIS. He can be disrespectful of Mexicans, be disrespectful of women, say the most outlandish comments that any of us would have ever heard. Guy running for president now. That is all purposeful to distract you from what he's really trying to do, which is in line with the large number of Republicans that refuse to endorse him, but will be at the polls voting for him. So, yeah.
Now, if I was a Republican, I'd be mad that this guy just came in and really took over my party. But what's really showing is like you have a split Republican Party, and you have this one Republican Party that's always been out there. And those are the folks that just will not relent. They're going to keep saying, we want Trump. We want Trump. These are the ones that come to the events and beat up on people who are of color. Just like, yes. So now I guess, since you said the media is, now this is the funny part. Trump says the media is biased and it is crooked and is anti him. Now, they've given that man $2 billion in free media. And he thinks they just going to keep rolling all the crazy things he says.
And let's be frank, it is the job, no pun intended, Frank. But I'm gonna be frank. It's the job of media to hold the status quo to a particular standard. It's their job to interrogate the world that we live in. And if he believes that the things he's saying do not warrant any interrogation or any critical analysis, he's lost his mind. But again, this is another strategy to distract his potential voters from the real deal. And that is to make you poor, to make your lives even more miserable than what it is. And it's not like Donald Trump does not have a track record in that respect.
How many times he filed bankruptcy?
I think 7 times, right? That's a lot of times, right? Goodness. So that's a snapshot of what Donald Trump Donald Trump's economic positions are all about, and you just interface those positions with your lifestyle. If you're happy with eliminating unions, if you're cool with Flint-like dirty water, if you have no problem with doing away with the U.S. Department of Education, if you want to simplify the tax code, if you are concerned about 0.2% of the 1%, and the fact that they may have to suddenly pay a little bit of tax for the millions and billions that they've made, he's your guy.
Has he said what he's going to do with education?
He said he wants to do away with the U.S. Department of Education.
And what's he going to do with it instead? Let the states run it?
In theory. In theory, Frank.
So that means my degree, my high school diploma in Illinois may not be good enough if I move to Texas.
Possibly.
Or like my college degree won't be good enough if I went to Oregon.
Not only that, but what will happen is if there's no federal funding that comes from the U.S. Department of Education to public universities, that means they're going to raise the cost of tuition, and that means it's going to be more expensive.
So that means middle class folks.
Not only middle class folk. It's going to go back to the days of old. When he says "Make America Great Again," he's trying to take us back to 1930, when only white rich males were able to go to college.
Woo!
So that's a problem. That is a problem. Let's pivot a little bit. Something a little more positive. If you've been paying attention over the last week, you will be convinced that in Rio, Black lives are mattering.
Tell me about it.
If you didn't believe Black Lives Mattered before Rio, the 2016 Olympics, you definitely believe it now.
Wouldn't that really be believable in swimming?
Well, it is believable. We know that Simone Manuel won 3 medals in swimming. She took home the gold in the 100-meter freestyle. She took home the silver in the 4x1 freestyle. And also last night, she took home the silver in the 50-meter freestyle.
And she was doing what?
Killing it.
And she was swimming, right?
Swimming.
They say black folks don't swim, right?
That's what they said.
Oh.
Yeah. She clearly is successfully challenged that notion and done away with that stereotype that Black folks in particular have been burdened with for years. And we can pivot from swimming. We can talk about gymnastics.
I like the little girl that's doing the little flips on the bar.
Yeah. Simone Biles the Great.
Smiling. Give me my medal.
That's right. And her future money, because she will be signing some major endorsements. Simone Biles. She killed it on the women's vault last night. She has won the women's team all around, won the women's individual all around. Black Lives Matter, Frank.
That is excellent. And you know, I saw the race with Bolt, and it is hilarious. He's even in qualifying, and even when he in the finals, he never looked stressed out. He looked relaxed. He was joking. And he was in a good mood. And you know what? People should take that demeanor into a lot of things that they go through. Because if they show that confidence that they can do it, he proved you can do it.
Yeah, it's a reflection of his confidence, a reflection of his humility, a reflection of the hard work that he's put in. You know, one of those
you can tell.
A situation where he clearly is not going to let you see him sweat. And he pays tribute to his home country. He pays tribute to, and is humble, expresses gratitude for having the opportunity to defend his world record. Tips his hat to Justin Gatlin, the American that came in second place.
Now, you know what? I don't think it was right that they booed him.
Booed Justin Gatlin?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, what happened?
That wasn't cool. You know, they booed him because he got caught up in using performance enhancement drugs and some other drugs, and he was running into problems staying qualified in track and field. But hey, he bust his butt, you know, got back right with the Olympics and with all other people that regulatory track and field, and you know he gave Bolt a good run.
He did.
He gave him a good run.
Black lives are still mattering. Usain Bolt took the gold, and Justin Gatlin, I believe, took the silver. Now we can bounce to the shot put space. Michelle Carter, the daughter of former San Francisco 49er and Olympic gold medalist Michael Carter, she acquired the gold in the shot put. Never been done. Never been done.
Now, did you see Mo Farah?
Oh, the 10,000 meter runner.
You see how they tripped him?
Ah,
And then they elbowed him,
ah,
and they just would not let that man get away, but he
no,
got away.
no, Frank. That whole experience was a reflection, and to me, of the black experience. 150 years of slavery, 100 years of Jim Crow, 100 years of bad housing policy, damn near 100 years of separate but equal, but we are still here. And the pride that beams across the smiles of African Americans across this country in the wake of what's been going on in the last 2 years is a reflection of that fact. We are not even supposed to be here, Frank, but we are still standing.
So like
Not only
kids.
standing, but we're winning.
So
and
like
when we stand,
kids.
yeah, when we stand, we're actually standing to get that gold medal. And so it's Daryl Homer, the silver medalist for fencing. The last time that happened was 112 years ago. Okay.
Woo, that's
112 years ago. I
time.
believe it was 1904, Frank. Took home the silver medal in fencing. We have the Ibtihaj, pardon me if I'm mispronouncing that, Muhammad, the Bronze Star saber fencing event, the former 3-time All-American at Duke University, African-American woman who defied all odds and basically gave the finger to the establishment and said, I'm going to wear my hijab as we celebrate her victory, winning the bronze. And all this in the face of continuing discrimination and racism towards African Americans. We recall the Italian remarks about Simone Biles from the coach of the Italian gymnast, one of the Italian Olympians, that indicated that if she painted her skin black, maybe she too could win a medal.
Hating.
You had the Italian coach that highlighted how different it is now, how the determinants that would qualify someone to win gold are a lot more different and more conducive to African American athletes. Hate abound, Frank.
So that goes back to say that once we get good at something, they want to change the rules.
It's not supposed to be. It goes against convention.
Now look, there was a journalist that won an award that no one has really talked about, but we found out about it and we're here to talk about it.
That's right. 2016, John Chancellor for Excellence in Journalism Award winner. Many of you may be aware of what this award is all about. It's founded in 1995, presented to a reporter with courage and integrity for cumulative professional accomplishments. It actually is named in honor of the longtime NBC correspondent, John Chancellor. 2016 winner, first African American in 21 years in its history. Gwen Ifill, well-known political journalist, broadcast news anchor, author. She is the co-anchor and managing editor of PBS NewsHour.
Right.
She's also the moderator and managing editor of Washington Week with Gwen Ifill.
Did you see her face when she covered the RNC? How stunned she was. But she never changed her demeanor or her voice or say anything negative. She held on to the standard of journalism. But you can tell she was kind of a little shook at what some of the things that was said during the RNC. And John Chancellor was a very good reporter. And that's good that Gwen won that. But you know what? When we talk about these elections and we talk about things that's going on around us, there is something that really hit close to home when our governor, I hate to say our governor, but the governor of Illinois vetoed same-day registration. He vetoed, this governor, but you know what? It sticks to his MO. He will say, I'm for something or something's okay. He just want to make a little changes to it. He will say that Monday at 5 a.m. and at Monday at 5 p.m., even quicker than that, Monday morning at 7 a.m., he flips all the way back to the other side. There was legislation that dealt with allowing people to register and vote on election day. And, voting is a right, and voting should be made as easy as possible for people to exercise their right to vote. And anytime someone puts up something that hinders that right, you got to call it as they're trying to suppress the vote. Now, this governor knows that he has a lot of people who are anti him, and some of these people only voted for him because they didn't like Governor Quinn, and now they are really having buyer's remorse. And I'm just stunned, Canoe, that just last week he said he was okay with it. Then a couple of days later, he said he may mandatory veto it. I go to Vegas for 2 days, come back home. My man done vetoed it.
Yeah. Voter suppression has hit the state of Illinois. As many of you know, Texas struck down, a judge struck down Texas and some of their efforts to suppress the vote through voter ID legislation. The legislature for the state of North Carolina has been accused of being discriminatory by pushing voter ID laws that restrict voting, particularly for poor, elderly, and African American populations. We saw in Wisconsin, that was struck down in Wisconsin, and now it's hit Illinois. There's this conservative group, the Liberty Justice Center. It actually filed a lawsuit last week to stop Illinois Election Day voter registration law from being carried out this November. What's the rationale? Well, they're saying most legislative Democrats targeted for defeat this year are in counties over 100,000 people, where same day in precinct registration is mandatory. Okay. So the lawsuit says since Illinois only requires in precinct voter registration on election day in counties with populations over 100,000, it should be struck down for violating the constitutional equal protection rights of people in counties that have less than 100,000. Okay. So this is a backdoor way of trying to minimize and restrict voter access for Democratic districts, which plays well into Bruce Rauner's hands because he's a Republican. In the same way that he purchased a governorship, he now is in the process of trying to buy a legislature.
Oh, yeah, he's spending big money. The House Republicans just got another $500,000 toward radio and TV buys. So, yeah.
Yeah. And so the group's top expert is known for his vigorous defense of Wisconsin's voter ID law, which was declared unconstitutional. So this is, again, a backdoor way of trying to minimize the power of the vote in counties or in districts that would make it harder for Bruce Rauner to push through certain facets of his turnaround agenda that make it harder for middle class, make it harder for those aspiring into the middle class, and make it harder for racial minorities from poor communities to not only affirm their dignity at the poll, but bring about policies and legislation and funding that would make it easier for them to live a more prosperous life. And this is something that we're dealing with, something that really isn't talked about to the extent that it should be. It's something that we as listeners need to be made aware of. So when you talk to people who happen to be Raunerites that embrace his policies, or even if they don't embrace his policies, but embrace him, you ask them, well, can you talk a little about his perspective tied to voter suppression? I mean, it's clear that you need to be informed. It is important to be informed. And this voter suppression thing is dead serious as we approach the November elections.
Wow. That is, that I know that elections are big and I know a lot rides on these elections, but we have to stay vigilant and really stay on top of people to ensure that we make voting something that's easy, not something that's difficult. I've worked many election days, and it's a trip when you see people come in, and she can still vote when you get the provisional ballot, but some states don't even offer you a provisional ballot, and they come in with their ID, and the first thing that happens is you're not registered over here, and there's no system to allow someone to check to see where they're supposed to be at to go vote. So Illinois does a provisional ballot, but imagine that young man or woman waking up on the day of the election and says, you know what? I want to go vote for Hillary Clinton. I've never voted a day in my life, but I want to go vote. And they go up the street or around the corner, wherever they go to their local polling place, walk in and tells the election judge, I'm Joe Smo and I want to vote. And the lady says, well, are you registered to vote? No, I'm 30 years old and I decide I want my vote to count. I want to be able to vote. Well, what this governor just did was took away that election judge ability to say, here, fill this out. Let me see your ID and go vote. And that's just terrible.
Yeah.
And the reason why is because voting is so important, because we can use our vote like you use gold and change some of these policies that's making life very hard on Black folks, especially when we're dealing with law enforcement, higher taxes, some of everything that's going on that's impacting our everyday quality of life. So, what stunned me, and I've been in Vegas for the last couple of days, is when I came home and heard about Milwaukee and the things that's going on up in Milwaukee. If you don't know, a 20-year-old Black male was shot by a Black Milwaukee police officer who had a body cam on. And I just feel like Milwaukee was already at its tipping point. And regardless of who's right or wrong or how this all plays out, Milwaukee is showing that, and it's not just Milwaukee, it's other cities. They're at that tipping point that any little thing can tip things over and start the rioting and the things that's happening up in Milwaukee. And, rioting in your own neighborhood isn't good, but they're showing their frustration at the whole system. And Canoe, what do you want to say about, because, I'm really shook up by it because, North Lawndale, where I live, was impacted by riots in 1968. And when I see those vacant lots, we're still impacted by those actions in 1968.
Yeah. For those that don't know, it was a fatal shooting of a suspect, Seville Smith, 23 years old, shot by a Black police officer while he was trying to flee an officer who had stopped his car. As a result, 6 businesses were burned, 7 police cars damaged. 20 police in riot gear faced a group of more than 100 protesters. 17 people were arrested. 4 police officers were injured. Governor Scott Walker, Wisconsin's governor, has activated the National Guard, and our friend, some would say sellout, Sheriff Clark, is in support of activating the National Guard. We still haven't seen any dash cam video. It's my understanding, that rather not dash cam video, but body cam video.
Right.
We have yet to see it. The mayor of Milwaukee indicated that he has seen it and that that Mr. Smith did have a gun in his hand. The needle hasn't moved since 2014. Whether you're talking about Baltimore, whether you're talking about Ferguson, whether you're talking about Madison, Wisconsin, whether you're talking about Milwaukee, whether you're talking about the west side of Chicago, whether you're talking about the south side of Chicago, it's less place specific and more demographic specific.
So let me ask you this question.
Hold on, Frank.
What would happen? Where do you think that needle would go if this had been a white woman in Ferguson, a white woman in Baton Rouge, a white woman in New York, a white woman in Baltimore? Where do you think that needle would have went?
I think there would have been more compassion for the victims. In this case, we seem to feel that there's more compassion for the police. And at the end of the day, Black communities have lost faith in law enforcement, lost faith in the fact that government is supposed to work for all the people. Government in many Black communities is more like tyranny compared to democracy. And at some point, people are just aren't going to take it anymore. And what you're seeing in Milwaukee is not just a reflection of or a reaction to what happened to Mr. Smith. It's a reflection of how government government's racist policies have affected African American communities over the years, not just over the last 2 years, but over the last 40 or 50 years. Um, Black communities are managed. It was always a strategy to manage communities versus developing communities. And at some time, what will happen is, and what we're seeing across the country is oppression busting at the seams. It's no different than what you see in a third world country when you see people who are accosted and abused and killed and law enforcement working against their interest every single time. If Mr. Castile was Jewish, if Mrs. Bland was a white woman, if Michael Brown was a white male, or we could flip it. If the police officers that did the killing were black police officers, killing white males, killing white females, there would be crazy outrage and there'd be compassion for the victims.
Man, you know what would have happened? Congress would have had a special session.
Oh, yeah.
To supplement some money to all the police departments in America on how to interact with citizens and how to properly pull somebody over, how to properly say good morning or good afternoon or good evening, ma'am or sir. May I see your driver's license? I pulled you over for X, Y, and Z.
Right. Racist policies and the disregarding of poor people over the last 40 to 60 years are finally coming home to roost. And at the end of the day, we talk about the various fixes. They talk about solutions. They talk about better training. They talk about more police on the street. But I personally don't think there's a government fix to destructive cultural norms. I personally think the only fix is a commonality of experience between the victims of and the beneficiaries of those same norms. And certainly better policy can help in that government. When you talk about the role of government, not just in communities of color, but all communities, governments are different in terms of how government interacts with wider and richer communities is way different than how it interfaces with poor and browner communities.
Why you think that? You think it's because they vote? You think they pay more taxes? Why do you think that happens?
I certainly think that's a part of it. But again,
black people vote?
Not to the extent that we should.
Why don't you think we vote? You think because we don't get nothing back?
Well, I think in certain communities, poverty can breed a lot of cynicism. Okay. I also believe that when you talk about education, there's less of an emphasis in civic education now. And maybe that's part of a strategy to keep certain populations ignorant, so it's easier to tell them what to do. And that would lead to less resistance from those affected by those policies. But certainly voting has a lot to do with it. But I also think it's very much intentional. Like I was saying earlier, we're not even supposed to be here. The status quo has tried every tactic possible to minimize the power, minimize the presence of Black lives. Legislatively, they've tried to do it in the workplace. They tried to do it in the courts. And we still keep fighting. And we have to continue to fight. It's what we're talking about is a mission. It's not an event. And while marching is important, and we've been very successful on the marching front, we need to be more informed about policy. We need to do a better job of holding elected officials accountable.
Isn't that why we did this show?
That's that great segue, Frank. That's why we show, to keep people informed.
Look, what is this? August? So probably in September, October, somebody will be knocking on your door asking you to vote for somebody. Ask them some questions. Ask them what's their stance on the police treatment of Black folks. Ask them what's their stance on why the grade school up the street isn't getting the things or the resources it needs. And if that is that person that they're out here campaigning for, going to push for that if elected or reelected. Or how come my neighborhood don't have a community center? Or how come my neighborhood don't have a grocery store? Or how come my neighborhood don't have things to keep African Americans with things to do like you see in white parts of Chicago or the lily white neighborhoods that's out here in DuPage County. Because at the end of the day, we all paying tax dollars. And you should ask, what's the return on your investment in paying taxes in the state of Illinois? Those times and those days of saying, I ain't voting for nobody because they ain't going to do nothing, or, I'm not going to get engaged with that stuff, or, I don't do that type of stuff. Well, look, these people you elect control everything, almost every aspect of your life, from how long that red light stays red, to the quality of air that you breathe, to that water you drink. And I don't care if you are using filters, they regulate the contents that's in that filter to see if your water is going to be cleaned or not. They regulate how much you pay for bottled water. So I think that, we can't stop living this dream world that we take voting lightly. And yeah, people say, yeah, black people died for you to have the right to vote. And that is true. And that should be a driver, but your only everyday life should be a driver too. And how you get out here and, this is your one time where you're equal to everybody, because you all have an option on who to vote for. We need to go back to them days where everybody got up at 7 a.m. Mom, dad, and the kids went together to the voting booth, or mom and the girlfriends went together to go vote, and make it almost like a family or a community event. Got lost on everything else, but this violence has to stop. The way we're shooting at each other and disrespecting each other has to stop. But you know what? When we were talking about black folks and young folks and their interaction with the police, let's talk about a bill that the governor signed that requires teens to be taught on how to handle being stopped by the police. It's kind of crazy that we're at this point. But yeah, there's a law in Illinois that says that you must learn how to interact with the police when being stopped by them. But I wonder, does every police department really teach officers on how to interact with all different races and shades of color in our society? What do you think about that, Canoe?
Yeah, Governor Ronald actually signed the bill pushed by Senator Julie Morrison from Deerfield that requires teaching kids how to handle being stopped by the police. And to your point, I feel like we should be putting the shoe on the other foot. How about a law that requires police to learn how to respect and honor the humanity of black people when pulling them over? And as I've heard many people indicate, remember, the issue isn't our race. The issue is our race, and not the extent to which we stay at our place. I don't know the perspective and the opinion of the Illinois Black Caucus as it relates to this law, but there's this idea that if those being pulled over and abused by police act in a more subservient or quote unquote respectful way, they will stay alive. Well, I challenge that notion because we've seen many instances where white children, white youth are pulled over by police and they act even more unrowdy. So the question is it really a matter of how youth, particularly black youth, act when they're pulled over by police, or is it the color of their skin?
It's the color of the skin.
Yeah, I mean, the question is rhetorical, but again, rather than teaching teens how to handle being stopped by the police, why don't there be a law that's passed that teaches police how to handle pulling over black people of color?
Well, you know what? Maybe when these folks are out here door knocking for these different folks running for state rep and state senate in October and early November and late September, you all should ask them that. Ask them, what are they doing to get these police to act right? What are they doing to make sure my school gets funded properly? What are they doing to address some of these ills? No, public policy can't cure everything. Public policy can't make a parent be a parent. But public policy can make sure that school has a counselor, has a nurse, has an arts program, have a civics class, and have everything to make sure that kid is well-rounded. That leads into when we talk about education, this past weekend, the Bud Billiken Day Parade. My cousin called me and said, "Man, Frank, I did over 26,000 steps Saturday at the Bud Billiken." And, I'm one of those types. I go every other year. When I worked at the county, though, I was there every year. And one of the greatest things I really enjoyed seeing was the South Shore drill team. And when I left to go to Vegas, I heard that the drill team voted not to attend because our great mayor told our alderman, and this is just me talking, that the parade lasts too long. They need to cut the time down. So the Bud Billiken folks decide to cut down the maximum number of people that can be part of the parade when different groups come by, which will negatively impact the South Shore drill team. Canoe, you was here. Let's find out what happened to the drill team.
Well, from what I understand, the city of Chicago has been trying to tone down the parade for years. They've been trying to shorten the time. They've been trying to shorten the length. For the longest time, the colonel of the Chicago Defender Charities that's responsible for putting the parade on, I forget his name, he balked. It's my understanding they have a new person. The colonel retired. Mm-hmm. There's a new person overseeing the Defender Charities. Defender Charities is responsible for organizing the parade. She acquiesced. She opted to decrease the time of the parade. One of the aldermen indicated that the reason they wanted to, well, two things. The city said they want to decrease the time of the parade to cut costs, to limit the amount of overtime. In doing so, they thought it would be best to limit each group to 100 kids. It's my understanding that they also indicated that they didn't want any gang violence to take place, that gangbangers don't wake up until 12 noon on Saturday. This is what it was told to me. Gangbangers don't wake up until 12 noon, so we want the parade to start at a certain time and we want it to end by 12 noon. Ridiculous. The parade has been going on 87 years. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I cannot recall. I've been in Chicago almost 25 years. I cannot recall one time where gang violence ruined the festivities.
Never happened. You had an incident maybe 2 or 3 years ago, but that was 3 to 4 blocks away from the parade route. So
the spokesperson also indicated that they also did not want to have the kids waiting in the sun 6 to 7 hours, which the kids have been waiting in the sun 6 to 7 hours for the last 87 years. They've had sponsors that have brought over water that feed the kids in the morning as they get organized and prepared to walk down the street, which I believe starts at 39th Street on King Drive and goes south to 55th.
Yeah, we have to be there at 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning. I mean, but it's not grueling.
So the bottom line is, to many, and Facebook and Twitter went crazy, the Bud Billiken Parade for the first time was a public relations disaster. If you happen to be over there, it was not packed like it normally is. The South Shore Drill Team, I believe, has 241 kids. As many of you know, it's a band, it's a dance troupe. To ask them to trim their number from 247 to 100 is disrespectful. And so the South Shore Drill Team held their own event at the Comer Center on Saturday on South Chicago Avenue. It was well attended.
Oh, wow.
But at the end of the day, instead of limiting the Bud Billiken Parade, in this day and age, looking at what's going on in our communities, the attempts to mute our voice, they should have expanded the Bud Billiken Parade. It's strange, when Lollapalooza took place, there was no issue about overtime for police, about saving, decreasing the amount of time that Lollapalooza would take place. There's no efforts during the St. Patrick's Day parade over in Evergreen Park to shrink that down. But all of a sudden, there's this concern about gang violence. But that has never been the case in 87 years. There's all of a sudden there's this issue about there's too many kids in the group. We want to shrink the number of kids down to make the parade shorter. You don't shorten the parade by restricting the number of participants. You shorten the parade by the distance. If you take Tito Jackson out of the Jackson 5, that doesn't change the time of how long the performance is going to be. So again, you can't help but look at this situation with a jaundiced eye and feel that there's some funny business going on related to the Bud Billiken Parade, the largest African-American parade in the country, consistently peaceful for 87 years and counting. And the reason that the city wants to limit it is because they want to save money on overtime costs.
Yeah.
You just continue to disrespect and verbally insult Black communities, and you just don't get it. I don't know who is advising the fifth floor. I don't know who is advising those aldermen in these particular wards in which the parade takes place. But by all accounts, it was a disaster. It was a public relations nightmare, regardless of the spin that those on the fifth floor and those in the third ward try to apply. Hopefully they'll get it right next year and not ruin it the way they did this year.
Wow. You know what? I just got an alert. Reuters is reporting that the city of Milwaukee is putting on a 10 p.m. curfew to try to address the rioting that's going on. I also got a report saying that Trump has decided now to say he will work with NATO in defeating the Islamic State, and that what's her name? Miss Biles got a bronze. She fell off the beam, and that's why she ended up getting the bronze instead of the gold in the Olympics. It just happened.
So she fell off the beam, but she still placed.
Yeah.
So she's still coming home with the bronze.
She's still coming home with the bronze.
And Donald Trump, we know a few weeks ago, he scared the hell out of our world partners as it relates to NATO, indicating that we would not come to their defense. Now he seems to be backtracking a little bit.
Yeah, now the Wall Street Journal.
I know we're jumping around.
Yeah, we're jumping around, but I'm just getting all these different alerts at the last second. Is now saying that if Donald Trump doesn't get his act together within 3 weeks, he needs to get out.
Who's saying that?
Looks like it's the Wall Street Journal.
Okay, so that's just an opinion. I think
that's a strong conservative voice.
Yeah, it may be, but again, as the pundits have indicated, as you and I have indicated, online and offline in conversations, Donald Trump is not appealing to the establishment, to mainstream media, to those in the know. Every move he makes, everything he says resonates with that silent majority that we may not that we previously haven't really paid much attention to. So Wall Street, the more the Wall Street Journal tries to throw him under the bus and suggest that he get out the race, all you're doing is inspiring all the Trump voters to come to the polls in November.
It's not enough of them.
Well, I don't know. We'll see. When we talk about Trump voters, we know Republican turnout for the primary was up 60%. Democratic turnout for the primary was down 20%. Donald Trump spent 1/5 of the money that Clinton and Sanders spent because of the free media he was getting.
He got free media.
So everyone's been saying,
if I got $2 billion in free media, I would do.
Yeah. So all I'm trying to say is the normal metrics that would render Trump's campaign a dismal failure don't apply. I'm not saying I'm not necessarily a fan of Trump. I'm not saying he's going to win. I don't want him to win. But I think we need to be cognizant of the fact, regardless of what the pundits say.
He got on the Trump t-shirt.
There you're lying. I do not have a Trump t-shirt on. Regardless of what the pundits say, this is a guy who we need to keep on our radar. And it's been said over and always been said ad nauseum. So whether we're talking about the Bud Billiken Parade controversy, whether we're talking about issues that are taking place 90 miles away from Chicago and Milwaukee, whether we're talking about situations that have taken place in our South and West Side neighborhoods, there seems to be an all-out attack on all things Black community. And we're not doing a good job of addressing the problem. I'm not necessarily a fan of martial law and indicating that there should be a curfew in certain communities. I don't know one situation where that's been a long-term viable strategy. It might be a temporary stopgap measure, but I think you're just making things worse. And so I don't know really, what it will take. I mean, everyone indicates that this has to stop. This has to stop. The fact of the matter is, it is not stopping. It is not stopping.
Oh, are you going to the state fair?
No,
You're not going to Democrat Day?
no, I won't be there.
You're not going to go see the butter cow? Getting you some pizza on the stick?
I get that from Italian Fiesta.
Oh, see, you got to be able to come on down to Springfield. I'll be in Springfield this week. This Thursday is it. Well, we don't call it Governor's Day no more because it's a Republican governor now.
Right.
Well, anyway, in Springfield during the state fair, one day is Governor's Day, and that is the governor of the state and the party that he or she comes out of, and then the next day is the party that does not have the governor's office. So this year is just hitting me that it's just Democrat Day. And this is a day when all the Democrats show up in Springfield and talk about what's wrong in government and how they are the party that is trying to steer Illinois in the right direction. But I'm going down because it's a great event. And, they don't really publicize it enough here in Chicago, but the state fair is a great thing to get urban kids to come down and see like the 3 different kinds of corn and the butter cow. And they have rides and everything. You ever been?
I have been, yes.
Don't you think it's an enjoyable one?
It's enjoyable. It's good. It's a good event.
He's a city boy.
I have a cynical frame of mind when it comes to our elected officials these days. And I just don't feel that it doesn't seem to me that they are doing enough. I feel like they're more beholden to donors than they actually are communities.
Well,
and
why?
So we can eat all the corn and have our faces designed by all the clowns we want. But in my mind, while I'm down there in Springfield enjoying those festivities, I think about what goes on those committees. I feel like what goes on in various communities. I think about what goes on at colleges and universities where their funding has been hamstrung.
Like Chicago
State, like Northern, like Western Illinois University, like Illinois State, all the 12 or the 9 or 12 colleges and universities across the state. That's what I think about. I think about the shortage of resources in communities of color that are put in place to manage the lives of households and children that don't have anyone to manage their lives. So I'm less impressed by some hot dogs and some clowns and some elected officials that get on the stage highlighting the good that they're doing. And I won't put it on the Democrats specifically. I'll put it on the entire legislature. We know that there are lines of thought in Springfield who believe that, safety net programs and funding for those programs are a waste of money, so they don't vote in favor of those programs. You have a governor that seems to be anti-safety net, or he holds safety net funding hostage so that he gets what he wants, and the things that he wants make it even harder, that they actually exacerbate the existing problems that I'm talking about. So we're at this tug of war when it comes to lines of, 2 distinct lines of thought.
But to win that tug of war, and I get what you're saying, I'm down there every day for a session, and I get it. But the problem is this, and this is what has happened to some of the legislators, and I'm not speaking for anyone. This is just my belief, is that I think that they get beat down so much by the process of Springfield and Citizen Joe. They have to understand that your job doesn't start and end when you go vote. It actually starts the day you go vote. And then you have to, and I'm not saying every day, but you have to get behind your elected officials if they are doing a good job. You to be that one that talks to other people in the community to ensure that person gets elected, because it's not about the money. People overpower money all the time. But the problem is that people don't educate themselves, don't get informed, and thus they end up voting the wrong way, voting just because that name sounds good, or vote because that person speaks so well. Uh, Mary Mitchell, she said it perfectly. You know, if we really, really took our vote serious enough, some of these parts of this country, like the West Side and South Side Chicago, would not look the way that they do. The riots happened in 1968. You would have thought by now they would have rebuilt North Lawndale, Alston, East Garfield, Roseland, Inglewood, and some of these other communities that have been economically depressed since the riots. Yet we can rebuild Iraq. We can build new suburbs. We can build airports. We can build United Center. We can build a couple of skyscrapers. We can redo the lakefront and spend billions of dollars on infrastructure and community improvements. But no one is forcing or pushing these elected officials to take care of us and our agenda and what we want. And people say black folks don't have an agenda. Yeah, we do. We don't have a sound, hardcore, put it on a paper agenda, but every black person wants an improvement in their quality of life. Every black person wants to be able to sit on their front porch on the summertime, not worry about guns and bullets flying everywhere. Everybody wants to be able to walk or do a short drive to a grocery store, to a dry cleaners. Everyone want to be having access to a place where they can go get on the internet and hobnob with other people. Everyone in communities want that. You know, they want access where you don't have to drive downtown to go see a lawyer or see a dentist or see your local doctor. You know,
Yeah.
everyone wants those things, but we have to work to get those things and demand those things.
Yeah. Yeah, there certainly is. There is a platform, Frank. It's always revolved around equity. It's always revolved around access, and it's always revolved around opportunity. And when you see a shortage of equity, access, and opportunities in communities of color, it's only a matter of time before things start busting at the seams. And you're right. Um, voter apathy, you know, the extent to which you're not willing to come to the polls is not a solution. Okay. All you have to do is look at Milwaukee. All you have to do is look at certain sides of Chicago where poverty is high, where resources are low. There's a strong relationship between an absence of resources and the extent to which crime occurs, an absence of resources and the extent to which opportunity is lacking, access to resources and a dearth of equity. You're not going to see it. And there's a microphone in democracy called the ballot box. And, you know, at the end of the day, we can talk about all the solutions, everything that should take place, but it's better to be in a prevention space than an intervention space. If you come to the polls, it prevents a lot of the mayhem that you see going on in our communities. But unfortunately, that message is not resonating with a large enough population of constituents in these communities, in our communities, and this is what you get. Sad state of affairs.
Wow, we got 3 minutes left in the show. Have you all joined our Facebook page yet? You know, send us some comments about the show. Let us know how you feel about it. Can you want to give some lasting thoughts?
Well, we've talked a little about what's going on in Milwaukee. We've talked about a little bit about what's going on with the Olympics. A lot of it good, some of it bad. But again, this purpose of this program is to keep you informed, to hopefully inspire you, to hopefully spark some type of debate and get you thinking, get you asking questions, but more importantly, to get involved so that the needle for our communities move in the policy space, in the politics space, in the program space, and all spaces that reflect a better access of opportunity, better access for, as it relates to equity and fairness.
Okay, well,
appreciate you for listening.
Don't forget to visit our Facebook page, Convos, Unheard, and Disregarded. We'd like to get some feedback. Let us know how you feel about the show. Leave comments, good and bad. I'm Frank Bass.
I'm Conway Kumare. We appreciate you.